Ever since I was younger, I've always wanted to be an astronaut, and that is something that's lived through my whole life. Since I started working, I've strived to work on projects that really matter. Projects that are right at the heart of us, solving the biggest problems that we face as humanity all across the globe. Something that I've done over the past year is develop a series of sustainability goals for the Moon, and these are modelled on the goals we have for Earth set by the United Nations. You might not realise it, but space actually does so much to help us on planet Earth. Helps us tackle problems, but also helps us go about our normal everyday lives. And the great thing about working in the space industry is seeing how space science and space technology is really enabling us to make a difference all over the globe. And who knows, maybe one day I'll be able to stay in a habitat like the one behind, on the Moon or maybe onto Mars, and be able to live as an astronaut representing Earth in space.
Good evening. I left PwC to become an astronaut. As diverse as the training is at PwC, it's very, very diverse. I couldn't quite find the online training platform that allowed me to pursue this ambition. There's a lot of risk in leaving a job that I left, way before you even consider the prospects of traveling at 17,500 kilometers an hour to escape Earth's orbit and go into space. Being an astronaut is not an easy feat at all. If we look at the numbers, only 562 people have ever been to space, right, in the last 60 years of human spaceflight. And that's going beyond the Kármán line, this 100-kilometer line that divides us on Earth from outer space. Of that number, of that 562, only 52 of them have been European. Yeah? Supported by ESA, the European Space Agency, and their program, and the program that came before that, the program that Helen Sharman, for instance, was part of, as part of the Russian Intercosmos program. Now, of those 52, 2 were British. Yeah? Helen Sharman, who I just mentioned, and also Tim Peake, who most of you will know in the room, who went on board the ISS in 2012. So you could say that with those 2 astronauts, I probably had a better chance of being an astronaut than being on the throne of England in the last 60 years. So maybe the odds are in my favor. But like I said, it's not easy to go to space. It's not an opportunity that comes up every day. It's not a regular job listing that you'll find on a job board. The last selection process was in 2008 and 2009, and the next selection process is likely going to be towards the end of next year, early 2021. That'll be a selection process for up to 6 European astronauts as part of the European Space Agency program. And this is a selection process that I've been training for over the past year, learning a variety of skills and education that will support me on my application. This is elements like microgravity science and how we conduct experiments in space, to understanding things like orbital mechanics and how space operates, but also the complexities of mission operations and design. So a broad range of skills that an astronaut needs in order to do their job. And I'm recently moving into a role with the European Space Agency within their Human Spaceflight and Robotic Exploration program in the Netherlands in their Science and Technology Center to kind of further this aim and this ambition. Why go to space? It's certainly a question that I get asked a lot as somebody who is so interested and involved in the sector. And indeed, there are huge problems on Earth that we should look to tackle too. But it's not one or the other. There's a lot that we do in space that dramatically benefits life on Earth. The way we go about our everyday lives through communication and transport is enabled by space through things like GPS. We do more accurate weather monitoring through space-like satellites. We're able to look at the planet in a completely new way by seeing it through our Earth observation data. That allows us to understand really the effects that we've had on our climate for the first time really in the last 50 years, and be able to take the right kind of steps to address climate change, the most pressing topic of our time. We're able to develop spin-offs because working in space and space exploration is right at the forefront of what we as humanity are capable of. So we're pushing the boundaries of technology, of material science, of other areas like how we cooperate and communicate in space. But there are also less tangible reasons why we go to space. We want to understand more about our origins of a species. How did we come about to live? What is our home and what is our place in the universe? Yeah? How can we conduct science experiments in space without the presence of gravity? And what does that tell us from a molecular level? But also other things, like how do we cooperate in space? Yeah? International cooperation has been a real triumph for space in a time when countries have not always been the best of allies on Earth as well. So there are huge advantages for going to space. But the one that I want to talk to you about today is really a cultural rationale, is the main reason why I want to go. So humanity has long had a history of going to space. It's long had a history of exploration, of going way beyond what is possible. We all have an innate kind of passion for wanting to understand more about the world around us. And that's why we've walked on land, we've traveled across water, we've flown. And now in space, we've been to space, we've walked in space, we've lived in space. But now we want to settle in space and create a sustainable presence in space for the first time since we've been there, which is in 1972. It's very important that we go to the moon because it serves as a very good platform for us to go to Mars, which is the closest point in the solar system where we believe there's a high chance of life. The moon is relatively very close to the Earth compared to Mars, so it enables us to actually go and send things to the moon and create a testing environment. So a way that we can test what the stresses would be like, the psychological stresses, the physical stresses, what actually is necessary in order to have a 2 or 3 year mission to Mars. We can do that from the moon. But also it's cheaper to send things from the moon to Mars. The moon has an environment that's 1/100th of the Earth. It has a gravity 1/6 of the Earth, which means the propellant needed to send a rocket from the moon to Mars is way less than what it costs to go from the Earth. Okay, so these are real big rationales for why we want to go to the moon. And what I've done over the last year is put together, working with space agencies and actors all over the world, a consolidated roadmap which sets out a 5-phase approach and how we can actually develop a settlement to be on the moon, right? This is really the next step. And NASA wants to go back to the moon by 2024 in the Artemis program, the sister of Apollo. So this will enable us to actually have that sustained presence in space that we've been missing, beyond low Earth orbit and our current role in space at the International Space Station. So this roadmap sets out how we can traverse from a small robotic-based settlement, a little bit like we have in Antarctica for conducting science, through to actually having a society that can thrive and live, yeah, and have all the emotions that we have on Earth but in space. One thing that's going to be very important if we go and when we go is that we do it in the right way. Sustainability is a word that's used a lot, but it really is important in space that we consider sustainability. We need to consider sustainability both in terms of environmental sustainability, ensuring that we take the lessons from how we've affected life on Earth. Yeah, we've not necessarily been the best as a species at protecting our own planet. And these are lessons that we need to learn when we go and move to other celestial bodies like the moon as well. So how can we make sure that we protect the lunar environment, the moon being such an important cultural heritage significance for Earth? And also important, if we broaden the definition of sustainability, is making sure that we can continue to go back, that what we do today does not affect future generations. And this is one of the big criticisms of the Apollo program. And the reason why we haven't been back since 1972 is that the Apollo program did not leave behind the infrastructure that allows us to return to the moon. It was a very expensive program, a space race between 2 countries, but it's not given us the platform to be able to go back. And that's what we need to make sure we do right today. We need to make sure that when we go, we leave the infrastructure that allows other people, other actors, other countries to go as well. And this is why sustainability is so important. And to this note, this is why I have developed a series of sustainability goals as part of a team at the International Space University and in conjunction with the European Space Agency, 15 sustainable development goals, which are like the UN Sustainable Development Goals that set out how we should use the moon, and they provide guidelines for all space actors. And one of the cool things we're going to do with that is we've built a hydrogen plane, which is a kind of like a green fuel alternative to fossil fuel planes. We're going to fly that to remote communities, such as a community in Greenland, and we're going to talk to them about what sustainability means. Because for them, like areas like northern Greenland, where they have small kind of Inuit communities of like, say, 2,000 people, sustainability is part and parcel of day-to-day life, right? So we want to make sure that their views and we get their insights as part of our work. Now, one of the things I want to get across to you before I leave the stage today is that in order to do some of these things I've talked about, to go back to the moon, to go to Mars, we're going to need everybody's involvement in that, right? There'll be many different backgrounds and experiences in this room, and I'll give you some examples. If we're going to go to Mars on a 2 or 3 year mission, it's probably minimum about two years, depending on when we set sail, we're going to need to look at the psychological stresses that come from the isolation, from the confinement, from the darkness of space. So we need psychologists to help us develop the kind of tests and programs to evaluate some of these stresses and make sure that the astronauts that go are trained and able to do it. We need scientists to help us with medicine and actually understand how we can conduct medicine without communications from Earth. How can we respond to emergency health scenarios in an environment where we could have a lag of up to 46 to 90 minutes delay between Mars and the Earth? So how do we make sure we do proactive monitoring, but also do surgical procedures in space if they are needed? We need architects to design the kind of habitats that not only defend us from the harsh environment of space, like radiation, but also enable astronauts to be able to live and thrive in space, to be environments like a home away from home. We need data scientists, I'm sure there's one or two of you at least in this room, to help us analyze all this data that we're getting from space, to understand it more, to create more intelligent robots that can go and do automated locomotion in space. We have so much Earth observation data we get every single day. We need to get meaning from this data. And data science is a great way that we can do knowledge discovery. We can learn more about the universe without the constraints of human knowledge. So these are just an example of some of the roles that we all need to play in order to get this collective vision. And I want to leave you with a final point. So my journey into space hasn't been the typical one. I started off studying economics. I did a Bachelor of Science. I moved to work at IBM and PwC. I left PwC and did a master's in space science and technology, and now working at the European Space Agency. Hasn't necessarily been the most sort of straightforward path of maybe a test pilot or an engineer or a scientist, the kind of traditional routes into space. But I'm able to every day kind of be out there achieving kind of and working towards what I wanted to do from as a very small age. Yeah, being able to fulfill a childish dream. And I say childish with intent because really it has two meanings, two separate connotations. The first connotation is sort of like or similar, right, as appropriate to a child. The second connotation says it's kind of silly, immature. It's a childish thing to do. And I think for the longest time, for me, working in space, it was always the latter. It was going to be a silly, childish thing. It was immature. It was not something that was possible. I think we've all had that feeling about certain things in life. But then over time, and especially over the last year, I started to realize that actually it's not so much the latter thing at all. It's more the former thing, that my thoughts are kind of similar to a child. Yeah? They're appropriate. It's behavior that a child would have. I think I can go to space. Yeah, I'm young. Okay, is that such a bad thing? Yeah, is it such a bad thing that a young child who hasn't been tarnished with self-doubt, knocked back by failure, decided that it's just not the right thing, somebody else can do it? That's what a child thinks, because a child is inquisitive, they have eyes open for wonder, and they think they can do it. Yeah. But most importantly, they take that through their life until they get to a point where they're just told it's not possible. You have a motto here at PwC which says, Reimagine the Possible. And although it might just seem like a corporate slogan, it really resonates with me. And that's because that's something that I feel like I've been able to do over the past few years. Really reimagine what's possible. And I want you to all take a moment in this room to think about that in your everyday lives. See if you can rekindle the fire inside you that I had within me from a young child. And I want you to have space to dream. Thank you.